Boy Scout. I'm sure there's a cat up a tree somewhere.
A cat up a tree? Isn't this just the cutest thing ever?
Welcome back, true believers and all you DC fans out there, to another very interesting video regarding our favorite topic with superhero video games, and specifically one of the most anticipated DC games coming, especially quote-unquote recently. We did receive a release date for this game, finally confirmed to be coming out on October 25th. However, there are a lot of facets with this game in particular that do have me, as a fan of the Bat family, a bit concerned as to what exactly the developer is doing with handling the property, and whether or not the end result will be something that is extremely hyped and looked forward to by the community, or something a bit lackluster and mediocre in comparison to what we have seen in the past with the massively popular Batman Arkham games. And of course, we are talking about Gotham Knights, developed by Warner Bros. Montreal, and today, joining me with this topic is a fellow Gotham Knights expert who does an amazing job covering the game on his own channel, with Alex from Podcast Now, who of course does a plethora of other topics to cover on his channel besides Gotham Knights that I definitely think that you will enjoy, especially what we talk about here on my channel with superhero games, Marvel, DC, the whole shebang. He's got you covered. And we've also done a collaboration in the past talking about Marvel's Wolverine, which I highly suggest that you go and watch. Alex, thank you so much for joining me today. How you doing?
Thank you so much for having me, and this should be a little spicy, I think, right?
Definitely spicy, for sure. Yeah, for this video, it's just going to be more of a laid-back discussion, going over, obviously, what we currently have seen based off of the footage and developer interviews, and just information in general that we have received about Gotham Knights, and whether or not the final outcome for the game is going to be, again, a complete success, or is potentially doomed to fail. And the first thing that I want to go over with you is just the premise of the game itself. It is in a separate universe from the Arkham games, which has been confirmed by Warner Bros. Montreal. However, the very beginning of this game, at least what we saw in the very first worldwide premiere trailer, is it looks like it's beginning at the very same sequence which took place at the ending of Arkham Knight, where Wayne Manor is in ruins, an explosion happened, something crazy went on there. It could be the same type of thing that happened in Arkham Knight or not, but Bruce Wayne is deemed to be dead. And now the Bat family, with Nightwing, Robin, Red Hood, and Batgirl, have to come and save Gotham City from the newer threats that are going to take place, especially since now Batman is gone. There's going to be a power vacuum, and everyone in Gotham is wanting to get their hands on just their territories, since there are going to be a lot of different regions to explore in Gotham City, and just a bunch of new threats that the Bat family will have to take on without Batman being there. My problem with this is, why are they starting off the game's main premise the same exact way on how the primary Arkham franchise ended from Rocksteady if they're trying to make this a completely different universe? I just personally feel like it seems a bit disjointed, and in fact, I kind of think that it's weird that the Suicide Squad game is the main title that is in the same universe as the Arkham games, while Gotham Knights, even though it is starting off as the same exact ending from Arkham Knight, is not in the Arkhamverse, and instead is taking place in a totally different world, where I think it kind of should have been switched, where Gotham Knight seems like the perfect jumping off point to continue from Arkham Knight, and Suicide Squad, while it still could have been made by Rocksteady, could have maybe taken place in a different world. What do you think about this?
Well, when you say it like that, it sounds like the planning, right? The planning, and that's probably the number one thing with Warner Bros. Montreal. And you know, I've been critical about them in the past. I wish them nothing but the best. You know, I don't wish for anybody to get fired. You know, I want them to deliver an amazing game. But I just think the biggest thing with them is that planning, just in the background, right? The idea of what have they been doing this entire time since Origins? And well, the answer is, you know, a couple other games and they were canceled, and then this game, and you know, and even the Damian Wayne game right before, which kind of leads us to where we are with Gotham Knights. So it's like, how did you get here? Who decided, like you said, kind of who decided this was a good idea to you? And I mean, you get it. I get it in a sense, right? Because they want to leave Batman behind, even though to a large extent, I don't think that'll happen. But they need to present it like that. And how do you do that? Well, you kill him off. And how do you do that? Well, coincidentally, it's something very similar to what you had in Arkham Knight. I agree. I just don't. I think you're going to confuse people that aren't like the super diehards. But I think in general, the bigger issue is just kind of that background planning from a studio in the first place, and that goes to, we've talked about it off air and even on air, the marketing, right? This release date with no trailer, like all that stuff. It kind of all stems from, I think, the same problem of I just don't know if they have a good grasp of how to do this, which is not, I'm not saying anybody should be fired. I'm not saying it's a horrible thing or the game's destined to fail because of that. I'm just saying, that is a legitimate concern.
And to add on to that a bit further is I totally agree, because it's even stranger that the premise kind of seems to also reflect a flaw that occurred with the marketing of Arkham Knight, where they said at the very beginning of Arkham Knight's promotional material from Rocksteady is the Arkham Knight is a brand new character that you've never seen before within Batman media, and who it ended up being, of course, is Jason Todd, who turned into the Red Hood, which made the most sense at the time because they were totally seemingly doing a Red Hood story, which they then applied into a quote-unquote new character with Arkham Knight, who is not the Red Hood at that point, but their version of how Jason Todd becomes the Red Hood in-universe. And that also applies to, I would say, the biggest factor of this game is technically this is not a Batman game. This is a Bat Family game where you are playing as Batman's sidekicks as the main protagonist, but the main factor with that is Batman himself is technically out of the picture, and all the developers at Warner Bros. Montreal have said that Bruce Wayne's dead, there's no way that he's gonna come back, and even if that is true, it could only be temporarily true. Because what I mean by that is there's this little small thing that you Bat fans might know called the Lazarus Pit, which they could easily chuck Batman into and bring him back to life if deemed necessary. There's not a whole lot of surprises in store if he ends up being dead by the beginning of the game, but then is eventually revived by the League of Assassins or the Court of Owls to then make him a mind-controlled asset on their side that the Bat family will have to face off against as the ultimate boss of the game. Just as a theory, but something like that is predictable. And the same thing with the Court of Owls as being this new major presence of the game should have been the forefront of the initial premiere gameplay marketing that took place all the way back in DC fandom of 2020, I think it was. But instead, we got this showcase of Mr. Freeze. And while I love that character, they kind of shot themselves in the foot because of how instantly people are going to be comparing that Mr. Freeze boss fight, which we only saw a small glimpse of, to arguably one of the best superhero boss fights of all time with Mr. Freeze in Batman Arkham City. And based on what we saw, Warner Bros. Montreal can't hold a candle to what Rocksteady did all the way back in 2011 with his boss fight, and seeing, of course, now being handled in this new genre of an RPG-style boss fight, which does not have the free-flow combat system or the in-depth stealth mechanics that we did see in the Arkham games. It just felt a bit rough around the edges and didn't really leave me as a fan with my jaw dropped on the floor with everything that we saw that they decided to showcase for the game for the very first time.
That's fair. I think that's kind of, and that kind of leads to what I was telling you right before we recorded this, the whole jaw dropping, right? I don't think anything that we saw has been like outright bad. And I don't think this game is going to be outright bad. I truly, truly do not. But when you watch the gameplay, I think the gameplay is fine, and maybe you could even say good too. I'd maybe go so far as say good, but it's not like you said. When I saw Hogwarts Legacy, not to bring that in too much, but there's a difference between your jaw, hitting the floor in terms of, oh my God, they nailed it, and then more maybe questioning, more like, oh, okay, you're doing a different thing, which Gotham Knights definitely is, and that's fine, what I mean, because I'm sure they don't want us comparing it to Arkham, even though it's inevitable, and maybe it's going to be unfair to compare it to Arkham, and that's totally fine. But I think we just have a little bit more questions, a little bit more concerns with Gotham Knights so far, whereas, again, other games I think can make the mark faster, where you see it, one time, first time, and you say, oh my God, okay, they nailed it. And of course, they show more after that, and Gotham Knights will as well, and has, but you already have a really good impression off the jump. For this, it's like it's a two-parter, is you show half the characters fighting, but not the other half, right? Two they showed, two they didn't. And so you're kind of left with like, well, are you ever going to show a 9-minute gameplay with the other two? You know what I mean? Are you going to show another boss? And like you said, yeah, you do Mr. Freeze, which is fine again, and they used it for the world, and I thought that was cool how it impacted the world. But then you know you're gonna have the comparisons to his fight in Arkham City. So I don't want to say it's like a lose-lose no matter what. It is in a way because you're always gonna be comparing it to the Arkham games. But again, I just think the way they've handled it with promoting it, and even as much as recently giving the release date, which I mocked them in a funny way, and actually the development team, some of them liked my tweet where I laughed and I said it's funny that you give the release date and you do nothing else. Like you drop it in the morning, I think it was a Tuesday or Wednesday, you drop it in the morning at like 7 a.m., it's just the date, and then you peace out. And you didn't show a trailer, you didn't show gameplay, there was no developer interviews, they didn't go on IGN, like nothing. You just gave the date and left. And I respect that in a way because I think that's so insane, and it's also very laughable that that's something that they actually did. We're 6.5 months now away, and it's not uncommon to go dark, but it's also uncommon to not show much and then go, you know what I mean? Like at least show a good amount. And I still think, I've said this before, they're missing it. They're missing that one. They just need to drop a Hogwarts Legacy-esque thing. Drop a 10, 15-minute presentation, show the other two, show the Court of Owls, not really a trailer, more like in-depth gameplay where we see mechanics. Do that like this month, next month, go away for the summer, go dark, come back in September, and then we're there for the game in October. Like, that's all they have to do. And maybe they do, but I mean, they just, like you've said too, they haven't exactly instilled confidence. And I don't think that's, above all, that's the least unpopular thing. You know what I mean? I think everybody kind of understands, like, you know, I'm not saying do we need to trust them or not, but in terms of do we feel confident in the developer, well, what exactly have they done to prove to us that they deserve that? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of instant flaws that you can see right off the bat with how they decided to go about marketing the game, but also, yeah, while it might be unfair to compare it to the Arkham games, since it is two completely different studios with Rocksteady and Warner Bros. Montreal working on this, even though they did make Arkham Origins, there still are a lot of expectations from fans, hoping that it will reach that same amount of quality that those games in the past generations, mind you, with the PS3 and Xbox 360 era, should now be able to accomplish currently on current/next-gen consoles with PS4, PS5, and Xbox One and Series X, which leads me to my final potential massive flaw that the game may or may not have, depending on what the final result will be, is who exactly is the main character of this story. Because as we currently know, is that there is a system in place with the characters that you and your friends, since this is a co-op game, can in fact play as two copies of the same character in the open world and during missions. So if you want to, you and your buddy can play as two Red Hoods, two Nightwings, two Batgirls, or two Robins, and decide to go about exploring Gotham and fight criminals however you want, which is fine from a gameplay perspective, since you do want to play as whichever character you want, but from a narrative and technical perspective, how does that affect the story of the game? Because in the main trailers that we have already seen, we do get a glimpse of the entire Bat family going up against the Court of Owls, which is fine. But all of these Bat family members do have their own voice actors attached to them. In fact, one of our favorites, Stephen O. Young, who played Mr. Negative in Spider-Man PS4, is the main voice of Jason Todd Red Hood in Gotham Knights. But we don't know who exactly or what exactly the story is going to revolve around. It's not going to, at this current point in time, it's not going to have a focus as to who exactly we should pay attention to the most within the Bat family dealing with the struggle of losing Batman as this father figure and mentor. And instead, they're going to primarily attach themselves to the RPG elements and all this stuff that a majority of players are not playing the game for in the first place. They're playing the game because it's with Batman. It's with the Batman characters and the sidekicks that relate to that hero. And if the story does not do justice to those characters, or even has a core focus as to what exactly or who exactly the story is going to be about and evolve with as we play through the game, it's going to end up being a very disappointing experience, in my opinion, especially as someone who loves the creative storytelling that can be done within the realm of video games.
It's tough, and I still am. I was gonna say I've tried to keep my my hopes high, and I still do. I think they could pull it off, because I think, you know, all it really takes, in my opinion, is when you have cutscenes or major cutscenes in the game. If you do what most games, I would say, do, right? Games that I guess you can play single player or co-op, which is literally this game, you could eliminate the second person entirely, right? You could literally pretend like the second person isn't there when you're doing a cutscene, so that, and you know, you said it off air too, like if Joker is talking to Batgirl, he's only talking to Batgirl. There is no, you know, background character there. You kind of eliminate them. I think if you did that for most major cutscenes, you'd be pretty okay. I do agree with you, though, when it comes to when you have cutscenes that are like very important to the actual, you know, main plot. How do you do those, right? Who, like you said, who is the main character? That's a tough one. I think they can pull it off, but I do wonder, you know, in general, who would be the main one. But my overall just worry, and I've said this in videos for years now, I was one of the only ones, I think the only one to call it out, at least at the time, is that I just don't, I am worried in terms of, yeah, I know you don't have to play as two Batgirls, and most likely most people won't. But the fact that you can, and then go around and literally play the entire game. Now, again, they can choose at any point to say, well, we're going to pretend like that second player isn't there for this cutscene. That's fine. And if that happens, then my point doesn't matter. But if it doesn't happen, right? So it's like you're going around two Batgirls, and because you can do that, how in-depth are these conversations? When you're having them with villains, when you're having them with side quest people, main quest people, whatever, how in-depth does the story go if you can play? Because if you can play as two of the same characters, that means the game has to support that, which means it can't go too far the other way to make them super individuals. And again, I'm sure there's ways around it, and I've made that clear. That's something that's always worked, because it's just such a weird, like, it's a weird thing. Even like Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, that doesn't happen. You can't play two of the same characters, which is weird. That Gotham Knights you can. Like you said, it's almost like it should have maybe been flipped. I really don't know.
And that's just kind of the main state where we are currently at as fans, everybody, is that while Alex and I are totally excited to see what the possibilities are for Gotham Knights and what the end result will be by the time it releases later this year in 2022, we're just kind of cautiously optimistic at this point to see what exactly Warner Bros. Montreal will do with this game, and whether or not the next time we see it, if it'll be any different from what we already saw, or is going to be completely different and totally switch direction in a great way that will be for the better for the Bat family at large. And with all that said, everybody, that is the video that Alex and I both have for you today. Let us know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you think? Are you excited for Gotham Knights? Did the footage that we saw of the game get you totally hyped for what the outcome will be? Or did it leave you questioning exactly the decisions going on at Warner Bros. Montreal and whether or not the experience will live up to the legacy of Batman and, of course, the Bat family themselves? Let us know, leave a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel and Alex's channel if you did enjoy. Thank you all so much for watching, and I could not do this video at all without the one and only Podcast Now. Thank you so much for joining me, dude. I had a wonderful time.
Thanks for having me. It was a ton of fun.
And until next time, true believers, stay awesome, DC fans, and peace out.